Hi, this video is about a new technique for helping unlearn problems with our gut bacteria that we may have acquired at a very young age. There's information about the HPA axis, your gut bacteria, and how vulnerable you might be to disease states as an adult. Hi, I'm Dr. Richard Matthews. I'm a board-certified chiropractic neurologist specializing in gut bacteria and how it affects our health. I hope you enjoy this video. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up. Consider clicking on the subscribe button and even the little bell icon so you get a notification every time I create something new. Thanks for your support. So the real subject of today's talk is this research paper that I came across, which is titled, as you see, Split-Second Unlearning, Developing a Theory of Psychophysiological Dis-ease. Now, let's unpack that and make something logical out of it. Really, what this entire study comes down to is something very, very fascinating. We know that the HPA axis, we're going to talk about in just a moment, is a part of your nervous system that programs how your fight, flight, or freeze system works. Basically, that breaks down into how easily do you get uptight enough that it affects your health. Some people can brush off stresses very easily, and some other people really are easy to trigger, and it's hard for them to get out of that stressful state. It's really bad for your health. So what these researchers talk about is that they suggest traumatic events cause what they're calling an emotional memory image, an EMI, and that EMI, that memory image, happens in just a fraction of a second, and it's recorded in your mind, in your subconscious, and that we, in daily living, we can actually replay those images. And it happens so quickly, and it happens in the subconscious, so you're not actually really aware of it. But there are some clues, and some of those nonverbal cues are things like eye movements. Now, they go into what the HPA axis is here. I'm going to give you a simpler version of that in just a minute. And they talk about a split-second unlearning model. Now, the idea is that when a person is re-accessing that emotional memory image, that EMI, for just an instant, they look at it, and their face may reveal a little bit of a change in micro expressions, those expressions that are there for just a fraction of a second. Now, some of us are very tuned into micro expressions, whether we realize it or not, and that means you're somebody that is basically able to read people to an extent maybe better than somebody else who's a little bit opaque and doesn't really read micro expressions well at all. It's something that's a fascinating science in itself. But when somebody is accessing their emotional memory image, they look at it for just an instant. And these researchers are talking about breaking that chain of events so that when your mind accesses the emotional memory image, something can happen to just undo that connection. And that's why they call it split-second unlearning, which, all right, that sounds good. Let's look at what the HPA axis is real briefly and how it gets affected to start with. Well, maternal precarity. I just learned this word, precarity, which is the state of being in a precarious situation. Maternal precarity and how the mother's HPA axis is affected changes the infant's gut bacteria and the infant's HPA axis before you're even born. What this really means is that your likelihood of being stressed by an event or a person and having trouble getting out of that stress is actually programmed before you're even born. There's a lot of evidence for this. Many different research papers talk about, stress getting into the belly, early life stress in the gut microbiome. I wrote about it in my book, The Symbiont Factor. the first several years of life really are where you're making the building blocks of what your gut bacteria are and what your HPA axis is. It's sort of programming how stressed or relaxed or fun a person are you going to be. That starts before you're even aware of it. Now, your brain and your gut microbiome have a lot of different effects. They cause functional bowel problems like irritable bowel syndrome, small intestine bacteria overgrowth, or SIBO. Those are all really caused by your gut-brain axis. And researchers draw out these great flowcharts to try and explain it, where things that affect the brain, environment, stress, early adverse events, change the HPA axis, change your autonomic nervous system. That in turn changes where your brain and your gut talk to each other. This is the lining of the intestines here. That changes your gut bacteria. So overall, changes in brain change gut bacteria, which changes brain. And part of where that happens is the HPA axis and the autonomic nervous system. Your mucosal immune modulation, that's where most of your immune system gets its instructions in your gut. Intestinal permeability, is there leaky gut? Reflexes, motility, how fast does the gut work? If it works really slow, you may be prone to SIBO. Endocrine signaling, hormones, all of these things really are part of the gut-brain axis. And bowel habits, how well you go to the bathroom, is one of the ways that we can see how's that working out. Now, autism has long been tied to gut bacteria. And this is another paper that really describes how the HPA axis and the immune response are part of that connection. When we look at depression and schizophrenia, the HPA axis and gut bacteria are right in there. And some of these newer research studies, this one came out last October, which is October 2021, they're actually talking about new therapeutic strategies for working with gut bacteria to actually change things with depression and schizophrenia by altering the HPA axis and how it produces your stress hormones like cortisol. Really, really fascinating stuff if you're into this, but it affects every one of us. And I maintain that all of us should have at least a basic functioning understanding of what does this stuff mean. It means there's a direct connection between your mind and your emotions and your gut bacteria and your immune system. And that's kind of a make or break thing for how healthy are you going to be and how happy are you going to be and how long are you going to live doing those things. Here's another paper that looks at the role of the host microbiome in autism and neurodegenerative disorders and the effect of epigenetic procedures in brain functions. Now, you might wonder, if you haven't seen that before, what is epigenetic? It means that your microbiome, epigenetics, is changing your genetic expression. In this case, it means that your HPA axis and your gut bacteria actually change how your DNA is expressed. You may have genes for something really good, and yeah, that's not going to happen if your gut bacteria are just wackadoo. So you really want to pay attention to some of this stuff so that you can be the best human being that you're supposed to be. Gut dysbiosis, which means imbalanced gut bacteria, causes inflammation, changes the HPA axis, changes the blood-brain barrier integrity, increases the risk of autism. And really, they're saying the microbiota, the gut bacteria, change the barrier permeability and change bioactive materials that transfer from the intestine to the brain. So your whole system is really a network talking to each other. When we look at neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's, this is what some of the newer research studies are looking at. Look at the wording of this: disease-modifying strategies based on gut bacteria. Think about that. We can look at the images from this study and without picking it apart completely, this is brain, this is gut, and these are the ways that it can go wrong and produce Parkinson's disease through an inflammatory cascade. Those of you that have been with me for a while recognize some of these words, things like cytokines, dysbiosis, short-chain fatty acids, and bad bacteria. Yes, we can measure your gut bacteria and see, well, how much bad bacteria do you have? And how dysbiotic is your gut? And that really can give you some clues as to what you might do differently. It's some of the testing that I do on a regular basis. Eubiosis means your gut bacteria are happy, healthy, and balanced. Nice community. They produce antioxidants, neurotrophic factors, dopamine, and anti-inflammatory substances, and that causes the brain to be healthy. Happy days. So when you look at the gut-brain axis and how it affects neuropsychological disease, it extends to obesity. And these researchers are calling it a classical movie with the emerging director, the microbiome, because the microbiome is now seen as the microscopic puppeteer, if you will, that kind of runs the whole show behind the scenes. So this is an image from that study, and it reflects how bad diet, which the Western diet, the standard American diet, burgers, shakes, and fries, that kind of stuff, that is the laboratory standard for the most unhealthy diet human beings consume on the planet. It's called the Western diet in research, so get to know that. And you probably don't want to eat that way, at least not regularly at all. That increases obese adipose tissue, and it creates leaky gut, which results in more inflammation, more free fatty acids getting in and causing metabolic syndrome, polyneuropathies, and brain effects like depression, anxiety, dementia, social alteration, memory deficits. This is bad stuff. Now, your gut bacteria are also capable of causing anxiety and eating disorders. The images in this research study aren't nearly as exciting. They're mostly just graphs. Sorry. But the point is that your gut bacteria and your HPA axis affect everything. So when we go back to the split-second unlearning, what actually are these guys suggesting? Well, they went through and developed a way of reading the eye movements and picking up on the different things that are making somebody use an EMI to trigger their fight, flight, or freeze response. And as an intervention, they're really looking at this sort of sequence of events. So we're looking at a traumatic event. And, this might be a child watching their parents in a fight. It might be a lot of different things. It might be an adult who just got served divorce papers or finds out they're going to be audited or is in some sort of court battle. I think the more you become an adult, the bigger the events have to be to change your HPA axis because so much of it is already developed. Now, the emotional memory image is created and then stress responses can be triggered. That creates a memory of psychological effects and physical effects so that everyday experiences can trigger this EMI activation consciously or even subconsciously. Now, if it's conscious, you might remember, oh man, that reminds me of something and I really did not want to go there. Or if it's subconscious, your mood just shifts, your gut gets in a knot, and you don't know exactly why, because it may have happened before you even started developing conscious memories. You get echoes of the original stress, and the brain puts out and activates what are called survival supporting narratives, which means what did you do or what occurred to your brain to survive that circumstance. And then those become part of who you are. They lead to negative well-being outcomes. Medically, that creates symptoms that get treated, and then you get stuck in this loop of constantly needing treatment to treat symptoms when really there's something that's driving that whole condition that could be addressed. Now, the intervention involves really breaking up this EMI connection that triggers your actual HPA axis. And they trained interventionists, they trained people in how to actually recognize it, how to make clients aware of the involuntary physical response by pointing out that somebody's doing it. This really is related to EMDR, if you know about EMDR, but it requires a lot less training and appears, at least from this paper, to be extremely effective when it's correctly applied. And as they say, it only takes a split second. The punchline at the end of this, you should go through and read this research study. It's one of the ones that's actually written in English. It's not too ridiculous to read. But one of the things that they created is they actually created an app for your phone. There's a free version of it and a paid version of it. And the app asks you a question and then watches for your eye movements. Those times that you look over, like you're looking at your emotional memory image, and it does something to intervene to break up that connection to your HPA axis. It's really, really simple. It's really fast. Haven't used it long enough to see if it's going to have an effect for me in particular, but it's not very expensive and it's kind of cool. It does not seem like an app would have a huge effect, but that's actually the whole point of this research study, is that it only takes a split second. SSU stands for split second unlearning. So anyway, it's something to really look at. We can use any tools, really. It's important to have as many tools as possible in your toolkit to try to get control over the HPA axis and improve your gut bacteria. And I think this is just another one that, hey, it may turn out to be really something fantastic. So, having said that, I'm going to plug my website. Rebuilt my whole website. This is my website now. And I offer functional lab work. I do functional neurology, chiropractic neurology interventions, doing things like what we were just talking about over Zoom, over phone, over emails. Working on a new website where you're going to be able to order lab work and supplements directly. Right now, you can still order quite a few of them through me. And I have a book. If you haven't seen it, it's on Amazon. It's called The Symbiont Factor. I'd love for you to check it out. It's all about how gut bacteria redefine health, disease, and humanity. We're working on a rewrite of that and a new version of it that encapsulates a lot more of this newer research. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with everybody. And feel free to leave a comment in the comments section if you have a question or a comment about anything we've covered today. I hope you got something out of it. If you made it this far in the video, God bless you, because I know I talk a lot. But this is a complex subject, and I think that you're worth it. So there you go. Thank you for watching.